Hello, and welcome to episode 136 of Prose. This week, be introduced to the funky place known as Notianimoba University, where you will hunt ghosts and fall in love. You heard right. This is one rather long short story, so we'll only be having one tale this week. Please do give me a shout about how you feel about the tale, as this might be a place we revisit from time to time together. While you listen, please head over to prosepodcast.com as our one-stop shop for all things prose. From there, you can follow the program on social media under @prosepodcast across all platforms, and you can also find the small but growing online store. If you are enjoying the show, please click that 5-star button for Prose wherever you are listening. It really helps out a lot. For easiest access to the show, subscribe using whatever podcast app is your jam. Maybe the one you're listening to the show on right now? Do go check out the Prose Patreon page at patreon.com/Prose Podcast and consider supporting the show there as well. Heaps of gratitude and some nifty Prose swag comes with that deal. Again, all of this is on our glorious website, prosepodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Let's get to the tale, shall we? This week, we have Horror U. Enjoy. Horror U, an original short story by Jared I. McGee.
The before part.
It was strange to find myself living in a dormitory again. Living in a dormitory. Just saying that aloud in my head was strange. The reality of it went beyond the strange and wandered confidently toward the outright bizarre. I had moved in all of 2 weeks ago for my new position at Notianimoba University. I'd pared down my furniture, my books, my knickknacks, and my expectations. I was coming into the new position with not too terribly much after the rough patch of soul-crushing jobs and failures of relationships. 2 decades of that will allow for the whole scorched earth toss and give away feature of moving to not hurt as badly as it might for most. Yesterday, my dad and his friend showed up for a visit. His friend lives 5 floors down as a faculty member in residence in the same hall as me, Borden Hall. They showed up, made small talk. They sat on my Craigslist futon, sipped dollar store coffee from my everything must go clearance coffee machine I had picked up from Kroger back home 10 years ago, and told me how happy I was going to be at Notianimoba. Harold, the other man's name was Harold, assured me that although I wasn't faculty and was in a wholly new position, the university was in sore need of a man of my skill set, and that I would most assuredly be welcomed into the fold with open arms. Conversation turned banal rather quickly. We made gratuitous small talk for roughly an hour, and then Harold and my father saw themselves out. I thought that they were probably going to seek out a better cup of coffee, a more comfortable seat, and more meaningful conversation elsewhere. With as busy as my father was, and with as many animals as he had back on the farm to feed and water, he couldn't be long for this town. He'd be off soon, so his Harold time was growing short.
Notianimoba is in sore need. Notianimoba is in sore need of a man of your skill set, son. You will no doubt be welcomed into the fold with open arms. Mark my words, Jason.
Sure, Harold. Sure. Sheesh, learn to enunciate, man. You're academic royalty. Anyway. I was set to start working as a paranormal investigator for the university, while also teaching composition on the side. The second feature of this job is the hazard with having a relatively worthless English degree. The prime feature? Well, that is what comes when you have been raised in the church, have senses that seem to pick up a bit too much, and have a habit of solving mysteries that just seem unsolvable to the regular Janes and Joes of the world. The position would make me a freak at Notianimoba, just like it did everywhere else. My talents weren't exactly mainstream, and I knew it. Everyone knew it. Everyone always knew it. That following Monday was my first full day of work. Sure, I'd had the usual walking tours, picking up of keys and other sundry necessary getting ready to launch style meetings, but that's not real work. That's inching up to the edge of the precipice before you leap. Monday was the real deal. I'd already settled into my office, surrounding myself with books and what few tokens of my past lives I thought would either comfort me amid the newness or exude something resembling seriousness. So my job was really to sit down and start digging into the rather extensive filing cabinet of backlogged reports from the campus security team. Those wannabe cops were in it to bust pot smokers, fuck just-of-age girls, and pretend at being real crime fighters while squarely away and safe from any real dangers most Leos faced on a regular basis. As such, they didn't have great investigative skills. So, when they encountered anything at all out of the norm, they tossed that abnormality into a damn near nonsensical report and put that into a filing cabinet. Why they were still using physical files rather than electronic was beyond me. Though, the fleeting thought that Notianimoba didn't want them to have digital files crossed my mind. Bored students don't hack into quadruple-locked filing cabinets in the sub-basement of the Health and Safety Building. That first morning, I had only just walked through the door, noticing my name now graced the frosted glass. "Jason Presbott," it declared to all passing by. I grabbed a file, this one on multiple reports of a translucent older man that looked like a 49er that was peeping into the women's group showering facility in Ramirez Hall, and read half through it when a woman came striding confidently through my door. She was maybe 5'3", with the sensible heels she had on. A decade or so younger than me. She looked like Marilyn Monroe come back to life, conjured into a new body, though modernized a touch from the 60s style that would have marked a true Monroe acolyte. Blonde, bright red lipstick. Beautiful, to be sure. She had not knocked, and without preamble, she dropped her sizable shoulder bag and less sizable purse and put her hand out to greet me. Her name was June. It turned out that June was to start working for me immediately. That came as a surprise. She had been there at Notianimoba for a while, so she was set to show me the ropes. June insisted that we put away the silly files, as she called them, and go on some real-deal field research. She took me to the lake on campus, where 2 girls drowned under mysterious circumstances. The body of water was off limits to swimmers now, as students kept drowning and drowning and drowning. She took me to the dorm room where co-eds kept hanging themselves, after cutting a superficial smiley face into their abdomens and scrawling, "Never gonna get me," in their own blood on the wall. She took me, after a long succession of other field trips, down to the main building's dirt basement where the literal foundations of the building are said to be haunted by spirits, as well as frequented by untold number of malicious creatures. This was where Notianimoba had started as a colony back in the 1600s, and it had been a place of death and anger and slaughter and abuse unbroken for 500 years. That will taint any place. In my time after realizing I could see and hear and sense things that others could not, I had seen plenty of strange things in my work. Other organizations had hired me as a highfalutin Scooby-Doo gang of sorts, but I had always worked alone. So it was comforting to have another human with me on my wanderings at Notianimoba. I wasn't used to company when waiting for a specter to come screeching at me or a wolf man to leap out of the forests to try to rip out my throat. So this was nice. Right about the time I started getting warm and fuzzy down there in the basement, a dust storm kicked up out of nowhere, impossibly, wind everywhere, whipping. Faces began to clarify in the swirling dust. They screamed out in pain and anger. They bore their teeth at June and me. They gnashed at them. They wailed. I was terrified. It doesn't matter how much horror you see. Scary things are scary. Abominations are abominations. I jumped. I screamed a rather high-pitched scream. I essentially leapt into June's arms. She held me with a growing smirk on her lips, whispered "it's okays," and helped me remember my training, who I was, my expertise, what I had made a name in doing. Together, we began to chant. I took out a fetish I kept with me at all times, something I'd picked up at a workshop in Haiti. June and I began the counter juju to calm the dusty whirlwind and the howling, circling spirits. Once I got my head about me again, this little act of calming restless spirits was child's play. The easy stuff. With my rather powerful fetish, the skill, concentration, and energy needed to push those spirits away was honestly negligible. Within 5 minutes, we had bested that spiraling dust of terror and were laughing together at how Notianimoba's new paranormal investigator showed something a bit less than professional poise in the face of his first, and what would likely be his most easy-peasy supernatural event at the troubled university. Laughing felt nice after so much fear and ugliness. It always did. As we laughed together, down in the dark and damp, June reached over to hold my hand, which was fine. Often, in the wake of these types of events, we humans need the physical connection to tether us back to reality and the solidness of our existence on this plane. But then she tried to kiss me. That was something more than facing down a ghostly dust storm. Sure, tensions were high and adrenaline does funny things to the brain. But this was a no-no on a number of levels. We had just met. I was too old for her. I was her supervisor. The list was endless. I did my best to push her away gently and kindly, and I told her it wouldn't be right. Especially right off the bat this soon. June seemed to brush off being rebuffed without a second of hesitation, brightly saying, "Oh, okay, then let's get back to the office." She started striding back the way we'd originally come into the basement, motioning for me to follow her. Strange that was. We made our way back up to our offices in no time. I was glad to have June with me throughout all of this, but most especially amid the basement adventure. And not just because that is where we encountered the apparition. The basement complex was a labyrinthine warren of paths and dead ends, and I had no doubt that I would have been hours down there in the dirt and dark without her guiding me. June didn't mention the hand-holding and attempted kiss for the rest of the week. But she did seem to wear less and less around the office, to touch my hands and shoulders more than was proper, to take me on several more close quarters / in the dark type field excursions. That Friday, I found a big book on her desk when she went out to deliver a preliminary report on some interviews we'd done with the girls from Rodriguez. It appeared as though June had been studying the subjects I am teaching through the university's somewhat progressive composition program. Maybe to impress me? There were tabs and post-it notes throughout the heavily annotated textbook. She was clearly doing more than a once-over browse. Then I saw another notebook. Now, despite being an investigator, I am not nosy. That is not my style. However, the notebook had a picture of me peeking out from the middle of it. So I let curiosity get the better of me and cracked it open. It was far less notebook and far more dossier. This one was chock full of research on me. June had done her homework. Whether it was to gauge me as a boss and partner or something else, I could not tell from a quick scan. And a quick scan is all I could get in, as I didn't want her to come sashaying back into the office with me nose deep in her business. Coming into this job, I had known that this was going to be a challenge. Notianimoba seemed like a pretty scary place to be. June had added another layer to navigate.
The and then part.
June and I came to work together quite well. The kiss incident was never spoken of, and after a few months of getting to know one another, her outfits became less provocative and her touching me stopped altogether. The way I saw it, my newness had worn off, which was good. Once I wasn't walking on eggshells around her, we began to banish spirits, exorcise demons, sniff out evil, and expose cryptids like the best of the best. We garnered a reputation for being unflappable and braver than brave. My life on campus was rather dull outside of work, though. Since I thought that spending too much time with June outside of our business dealings might lead us down paths we shouldn't traverse, I led a pretty isolated life. Grocery store, Netflix, the on-campus gym, running throughout the campus grounds. My favorite place to run was out near and around the once-haunted lake Skyben. June and I had banished the vengeful spirit of a girl that was rather brutally murdered out there, and the hauntings had calmed a lot. They hadn't disappeared, but no one was dying now. It was out at Lake Skyben. I think that's Scandinavian. Am I even pronouncing that right? Anyway, it was out at Lake Skyben that I met Addison. She was walking her dog James, an Irish wolfhound that looked like a horse crossed with a dog rather than a full canine. James had bristled at me when I ran a little too close to them strolling together. Addison had apologized profusely, reined James in, and, seeing that I was a member of the campus community, asked if I wanted to pet James, seemingly to prove to me that he was a big sweetie, which, as it turned out, he was. Addison Cole, who demanded I call her Addie, and I hit it off immediately. We laughed at the pup being named a normal human name. We walked to the end of the little pier at the connecting marina park on the far side of the lake. We talked about playing saxophone, sour beers, our families, being so far from home, and so much more. But nothing at all about the paranormal or any feature of my job. We exchanged numbers. Work kept me busy, but after what seemed like the longest 4 days of my life, I had finally had the opportunity to call her without June hovering nearby. There was no need to let June know my personal business, and it seemed cruel to flaunt in front of her anyway. I knew June was popular with the women and the men on campus, and she had had her choice of partners, but I also couldn't help but remember her reaching out back in that basement. Addie and I went to pizza on a Friday. We chose to go somewhere across town so we could be fully away from Notianimoba. Neither of us were vegetarians, but neither of us really ate meat, so that meant that I could have my extra mushroom, extra tomato, extra garlic, extra cheese pizza. It turned out that Addie thought that might just be the best pizza order she had ever encountered. It also turned out that Addie was keen to meet off campus because she too worked for the university. She was a full-time adjunct professor that made a few extra bucks like my dad's friend Harold, taking care of a couple floors of the newer all-girls dorm Bathory Hall. She had heard of me before we met, so she was rather surprised to put a face to a name. She said that she almost didn't agree to coming out with me or continuing to converse because of that. I was something adjacent to infamous on campus. Apparently. Moreover, she really liked me, and that was a problem. Despite our spark, we technically couldn't get involved. That would be a breach of university protocol. God knew that plenty of people broke that rule, but most of them were protected by either tenure or more power than either of us two peons had. Through this twisting and turning, though, it became apparent rather quickly that Addie wasn't telling me everything. We were 2 pitchers of beer and half a pizza in when it struck me. Here was this gorgeous girl who seemed to avoid her living space like the plague when she wanted to relax. Here was this woman who wanted to steer clear of where she might be seen. Addie had a boyfriend. I asked her if that was the case, and she spit beer out. She apologized and tried to reach across the table to wipe down my shirt.
You are a detective, I guess. Don't know why I'm so surprised.
She had a smirk on her lips, but her eyes screamed fearfulness. She was assuming this was it. I'd finish dinner, pay my part, and walk out of her life for good. That wasn't the case. We continued to talk. We continued to laugh. We continued to be 2 humans enjoying one another's company. She clearly wasn't happy in her relationship, but I wasn't one to pry or to be the foil to someone's partner with whom they're bored. Still, Addie was amazing. I was lonely. I had no friends. At the very least, I could be her friend and she could be mine. There was nothing wrong with that. We continued to run into each other out near the lake, her walking James and me on my runs. I came to realize that Addie was the yin to every girl I'd ever dated's yang. Hell, with all the time I'd spent with June, it was unavoidable to realize that Addie was the yin to her yang as well. June's hair was spun gold blonde. Addie's hair was coal black. June had cinnamon skin. Addie had the ivory skin of a woman in a Poe poem. June was prissy. Addie was outdoorsy and a tomboy. June oozed confidence and sexuality. Addie was awkward and self-conscious to a nearly crippling degree. The differences went on into infinity, but Addie really was just a different sort of woman than I had usually been involved with over my long years, in any capacity. Our friendship continued to blossom. I continued to rid Notianimoba of beasties and ghoulies and more. I kept my eyes and ears open for any explanation for June's research into me, but even after almost a full academic year, I hadn't had any clues about the why behind that. It was near the end of the second semester, right when the weather was nicer. The sun was stronger, and the students were abuzz with getting the hell off campus for the summer, when the report of an assault came across my desk. Addison Avery Cole. Addie. I was out the door the minute I read the name. June didn't even have time to get up from her desk, and I was already out the door and damn near halfway toward Bathory. I didn't want her here for the conversation I would no doubt have. I'd never been to Addie's dorm room before, but it had been listed off on the hapless Rent-A-Cops report, so I found it in no time. Bathory Suite 5A. I knocked on the door. Addie! Addie! It's me! Hesitantly, it opened. There was Addie, black eye and swollen nose. It looked like someone had punched her repeatedly in the face. I guessed that she saw the look on my face because she blurted out her story and grabbed me before she even attempted to close the door.
Jason, he's done. I dumped him, but he didn't do this. It was something else. I don't know. I don't overreact. It wasn't him.
The outburst hit me hard and then abruptly ended. I found myself inside her room. She sat me down. She began to describe to me that she was actually asleep and her boyfriend long gone after their breakup when she awoke to pain. And lust. Strangling. Shivering wetness. Scratching. Desire. Punches. More lust. It was all so surreal that she had thought she was in a terrifying dream until she realized she was fully awake and unable to move. She continued on, and my anger rose up again. This was something supernatural. Everything Addie had said sounded like a spirit was taking advantage of her while she was sleeping. It was a damned malevolent one, too. It had the capacity for physically lashing out both violently and sexually. That was bad. Really, really bad. I'd have to note this in the official record. I'd have to bring June in on this. After she was done giving me her account of the events in a more professional, calm manner, I turned off that part of myself and asked her if I could root around a bit to see if I could see anything that would clue me into what precisely had come for her. My phone rang. I silenced it. Nothing. No ectoplasm, no hex bags, no markings anywhere that I could see. My fetish and my holy water came out, and I did my rounds with those, but nothing was immediately noticeable. My phone rang. I silenced it. This would require more attention. My phone rang. I silenced it. Addie had hung back in what passed for her living room in the dorm suite. When I came back into the front section of the suite, she paced toward me with a bit more purpose than was normal. She was in front of me so quickly, I didn't have time to think. We kissed once. Gently. She began to tell me a mile a minute that she cared for me. She knew this wasn't the best or the right time, but when was it ever the best or right time? No, she assured me this wasn't PTSD. No, this wasn't because I was being a strong protector type. Yes, her relationship had ended because she wanted to be with me and couldn't avoid that. Yes, we'd have to sign an official declaration with the university, but she was willing to do that if I was. She had something very pressing, very important to tell me, though. My phone rang. I made to silence it again, but Addie reminded me that I was on call and somebody might possibly need me. Hello? Mm-hmm. You've got to be kidding me. And that too? It's slow season, good God! I'll be there soon, June. Give me 5. Some kind of something. Some cryptid had cut up a man's calves like it was slicing salami down near the wood's edge, and another young woman had been assaulted seemingly by a spirit, this time in the co-ed Mab Hall. This was all wrong. As the sun came back into the world, as the darkness retreated until the world tilted back away from the light, these things should be growing less bold. They should be becoming weaker. Plus, June and I had made a strong dent on the boogeties of Notianimoba University. This had all the hallmarks of a gathering of fell powers, a convergence of darkness, and that was bad. I made my usual canned apologies that I had to make when my job encroached on my life, but this time I meant them. Addie assured me that it was okay and that we'd continue this later. She'd asked if I could meet her at sunset out near Lake Skyben. Skyben. I said yes unless something kept me, and that I would call her. We hugged. I left. The rest of the regular workday went by in a flash. The weird was ratcheting back up. June had fielded 10 more phone calls in the few minutes it took me to match back up with her outside the main administrative building. 10. Our bosses sure as shit weren't happy. We got several phone calls asking us what they were paying us for. This much supernatural activity generally meant that someone was channeling those forces, opening a door for them purposefully. If I were a betting man, I would say that someone out there was being a bad boy or girl. June and I took reports for roughly 7 hours. On the surface, there was no connection between any of the cases, save 3. Addie's and 2 other girls. Something disembodied was coming for the women of Notianimoba. Again. We decided to call it a day so we could start with fresh eyes the next morning. Working on a Saturday? You bet. That was unavoidable with this gig, but it had been a few weeks since it had been necessary. Again, something was off. I bid my farewells to June after we filed our reports and locked up and headed immediately for the lake. The campus was busy. Joy was still thick in the air, even in the wake of all the weird. That was encouraging, at least. Joy had a way of combating the malign. I made it to the lake and saw that Addie was still out on the trails where we tended to end up when we bumped into one another on her walks and my runs. She'd not brought James with her, so a serious conversation without distractions it was then. I approached her making plenty of noise so as not to scare her. After the sort of attack she had been subjected to, I did not want to make her feel even more vulnerable. Not an ounce. She turned around and beamed at me as best she could through her swollen face. God, she was beautiful. Even puffed up in black and blue. She hugged me, then quickly pushed me away. Her eyes were deadly serious. We began to walk and she began to talk a mile a minute. Addie began talking about being pregnant. As she explained what was going on in her heart, in her head, in her womb, we found ourselves back on the dock at the marina where we had first connected with such passion. The sun had begun setting and catching the water ablaze. Looking out across what most would have called an accursed lake, I asked the unavoidable question. Any idea who the father is? Of course, you don't have to tell me. Sorry, I'm just always so awkward in these situations. I'm so sorry, Addie. I looked back to her from the choppy orange and red and gold luminous lake to see her chin slightly tucked, her eyes shimmering and smiling, and the corners of her mouth tucked up in a smirk. It's you. You're the father. Whoa, but how? We never... A father is more than a fuck, Jason. A father loves a woman before, during, and after the birth of a child. A father loves a child before, during, and after it comes into the world, too. You're being a father already. Let's just say it out loud. Let's just make it official. This is how it is, period. I was confused. I was scared. Maybe happy. Maybe even elated? I could see her start to shrink back with those thoughts playing out on my face, and seeing that hurt from her made my entire being flinch. My stomach roiled. I loved her. I loved her no matter what. I opened my arms to her and her falling face immediately brightened. Her smile was dawn. Her smile was something that could make or unmake me. Addie came in for an embrace. We stayed close and unmoving for a full minute. The wind made the water lap at the little fishing pier. This was the type of calm I never knew. After that picturesque 60 seconds, Addie pushed back just a bit, looked up into my eyes, and pulled my head down gently into a soft kiss. What I would come to consider our first real kiss. Once we parted, I continued to smile and hold her hands in mine while facing her. So, wow, does this mean your ex isn't going to be in the picture of the pregnancy then? I mean, I don't want to pry, but is he just not wanting to be involved? I asked. She looked a little sad, and then replied haltingly. My ex isn't the father either, Jason. I'm not pregnant by him. Hell, I wasn't pregnant yesterday. I think this is from the incident. The world shook. My head spun. The girl I presumed was now my girlfriend was pregnant by a lurking evil apparition that I'd have to track down and destroy. And she wanted me to be a father to whatever being was growing inside of her now? I quickly brought Addie in for another hug, holding her, both to comfort her and to hide the warring emotions on my face. Just another day at Notianimoba University, I guessed. As fear began to creep into me, I laughed, a mirthless laugh. Good ol' Horror You. Thank you for listening to Horror You, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. All sounds you have heard throughout this story come from YouTube's Free Music Library and freesound.org. Everything is being used under CC 0 public domain dedication licenses. And yes, that does it for Prose this week. I do hope you enjoyed the story, and if you did, feel free to reach out to me via prosepodcast@gmail.com or through any of the social media that you can find at prosepodcast.com. I would love to know if you might want to hear more about Notianimoba University. Alrighty, that brings us to a close. Until next time, which is in 2 weeks, love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life, as it is always stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for listening.